All right, let's dive right into this explainer and pull back the curtain on the completely declassified reality behind the world's most famous spy. I mean, we all know the name, right? We definitely know the number. But the true story behind the creation of James Bond, it's honestly just as thrilling as the fiction. Today, we're going to explore how one man's very real, highly classified wartime experiences gave birth to an absolute pop culture legend.
To really grasp the sheer scale of the James Bond cinematic empire, you just need to look at this massive figure, $6.9 billion. That's the staggering amount of revenue generated at the box office alone since Sean Connery first stepped onto the screen in 1962's Dr. No. With 27 movies to date, it's easily one of the most consistently successful franchises in all of cinematic history. It's just wild.
And you know that box office dominance? It's backed up by the staggering sale of over 100 million James Bond books worldwide. Since his original creation, the literary universe has totally exploded to encompass 63 novels written by various authors, though, of course, the whole shebang started with just 14 penned by the original creator himself.
So the big question we're going to unravel today is this. How on earth did a literary spy, purposefully given the absolutely dullest name possible by his creator, become a multi-billion-dollar cultural icon? What's really fascinating here is how a guy who spent much of World War II essentially stuck behind a desk managed to take gritty, real-world espionage and just engineer it into this glossy, spectacular pop culture phenomenon.
Part 1. Fleming's Secret War.
Well, before there was James Bond, there was his creator, Ian Fleming. To really get the spy, we have to understand the man who dreamed him up. Now, Fleming grew up in the rather intimidating shadow of his overachieving war hero brother, Peter. And initially, he kind of struggled. He washed out of Sandhurst, totally failed his Foreign Office exams, but then he cleverly leveraged his background as a Reuters journalist to land a job within British naval intelligence. Despite having zero actual field experience, he became a mastermind for Admiral John Godfrey. Fleming basically survived and thrived on his massive imagination and his total flair for dramatic schemes. Fast forward to 1952, sitting at his GoldenEye estate in Jamaica, he poured all those wild experiences into the first draft of Casino Royale, literally finishing it in just over a month.
It's absolutely brilliant how Fleming reverse-engineered his own reality for these books. He used his own strict, demanding boss, Admiral Godfrey, as the direct blueprint for Bond's superior M. Then, the elite 30 Commando unit that he actually helped create, that became the inspiration for the legendary 00 section. And as for James Bond himself, he's actually a composite of real-life agents, like the double agent Dusko Popov and the incredibly brave Tommy Yo Thomas, who was known as the White Rabbit.
Part 2. Blueprint of an Agent. So if we open up the actual dossier of his missions, you can see how highly classified and, frankly, pretty brutal World War II operations were directly smuggled straight into the James Bond canon. Central to this was the 30 Commando unit. Known as the Velvet Glove of naval intelligence, Fleming conceived this highly specialized team. Their job wasn't your standard combat, no. They were intelligence commandos designed to move ahead of the main Allied advance specifically to pinch enemy technology, radar equipment, and secret codebooks. Their incredibly daring raids in places like Sicily and Naples heavily inspired those technical gadget-stealing adventures that totally define James Bond today.
It is just absolutely fascinating to see how Fleming transformed these very real, very dangerous intelligence targets into the flashy centerpieces of his novels. I mean, he actually plotted Operation Ruthless, which was a literal scheme to crash a bomber into the English Channel just to steal a German Enigma machine. Crazy, right? And in Lisbon, he watched Dusko Popov gamble against German agents, which directly inspired the high-stakes chemin de fer game in Casino Royale. He even lifted the real-world Italian frogmen's limpet mines for Thunderball and used the German V-2 rocket program for the main plot of Moonraker. It's literally facts directly fueling fiction.
Yet, despite all of this high-octane inspiration, Fleming described his hero's name as, and I quote, "the simplest, dullest, plainest-sounding name I could find." Get this, he actually named his hero after a real-world Caribbean ornithologist. Yes, a birdwatcher. Fleming did this completely deliberately, though, because he wanted his spy to be this anonymous, blunt instrument, basically a quiet shadow moving through a very loud, exotic world.
Part 3. The Reluctant Screen 007.
Okay, so what happens when Hollywood producers finally decide to take this anonymous, blunt instrument and put him up on the silver screen? Well, there was a massive clash of visions. Fleming's personal vision for Bond was this elegant, refined, Eton-educated gentleman. He was eyeing classy actors like Richard Burton or David Niven. But
The producers cast Sean Connery. Connery was Scottish, he was widely considered a bit of a roughneck, and much to Fleming's absolute horror, he definitely did not speak the polished Queen's English that Fleming had always envisioned for his sophisticated spy.
And Fleming was remarkably blunt about his distaste for the choice. He completely dismissed Connery at first, famously telling his agent, "I'm looking for Commander Bond and not an overgrown stuntman." Ouch. He fought the producers hard on the casting decision, genuinely believing that Connery was going to completely ruin the refined edge of the character he'd spent so much time carefully crafting.
So to mold the Bond we all know today, it actually took the film's director, Terrence Young, physically taking matters into his own hands. Young literally dragged Connery around London to his own luxury shirt makers, elite tailors, and high-end shoemakers just to force him into the mold of a refined gentleman. But, combined with Connery's undeniable, almost brutal on-screen magnetism during the action sequences, this physical transformation finally won Fleming over. In fact, Fleming ended up liking Connery so much that he later officially wrote Scottish heritage right into James Bond's literary backstory.
Part 4. Changing cinema forever.
Once Connery stepped into that tailored suit for 1962's Dr. No, it wasn't just a win for the producers. It seriously sparked a cinematic revolution. The James Bond franchise permanently altered the landscape of global cinema forever. It essentially initiated the entire modern multi-part movie franchise model that we see literally everywhere today. And over the decades, it evolved the Bond girl from a simple sidekick into these highly capable, physically demanding action roles. Just think of powerhouses like Michelle Yeoh or Grace Jones. Plus, it spawned endless generations of spy cinema imitators, laying the direct groundwork for huge franchises like Mission Impossible, Bourne, and Kingsman.
We also really can't talk about Bond's cinematic legacy without touching on the actual business of movies. Because over the decades, Bond transformed into an absolute branding powerhouse. Starting with Connery wearing a Rolex in Dr. No, to the iconic Aston Martin DB5 and Goldfinger, eventually shifting to Omega and GoldenEye, and even that massive Heineken integration we saw in Skyfall. Bond heavily influenced how modern blockbusters weave luxury sponsors directly into their narratives, essentially pioneering modern product placement as we know it today.
So, what's the crucial point to take away from this explainer? Well, it's that Ian Fleming's own life, a life initially marked by unfulfilled military ambition and, honestly, a lot of desk-bound intelligence work, ultimately became the fuel for the most spectacular fictional hero of the 20th century. He took the invisible, highly classified world that he knew intimately, and he amplified it into a total global phenomenon.
Which leaves us with this final thought. With the franchise currently searching for its next face after Daniel Craig's incredibly successful, gritty run, we just have to ask. As a new era approaches, will the next 007 reflect Fleming's original, elegant Etonian ideal? Or are they going to reinvent the rugged roughneck all over again? Whatever happens, Ian Fleming's highly classified legacy is undoubtedly going to continue captivating the world. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep asking questions.